Yes, I did. We're on now? Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is the Board of County Commissioners work session on Thursday, April 16th, 2020. Today we are having the Airport Vision Committee present their recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. This is a virtual meeting in our meeting room here at the county building. We have myself and Patty Clapper as the two commissioners present in person, and John Bennett, who is the pilot of the Vision Committee. Is that right, John?
That's it, I suppose.
And then Andrew running the nuts and bolts of the Zoom system. So, to begin, I'm going to present first, and then we'll pass it on to John Peacock, then John Bennett, and then to Valerie Braun in that order. So, many people have asked us why we were holding this meeting, a virtual meeting on the airport, which is such an important subject. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have to hold these virtual meetings, not have meetings in person. We felt it was, the Board of County Commissioners felt it was very important for the Vision Committee to be able to present their report to the commissioners. They've been working very hard on it for over a year, and it is really time for them to pass the baton on to the county commissioners. We are trying to continue conducting our business as usual in spite of the virus. There's lots of extra things associated with the virus we have to do, but trying to keep the other county business going is very important. We wanted to get the recommendations to the commissioners at this time because it's going to take us a long time to process all the information we're getting. We're going to have lots of meetings going into the future where we're going to be discussing various parts of the report. We will be holding a meeting in person, and we hope to do it in the near future as soon as we're able to hold public meetings. That would be the one where it would be a public hearing. The public in person can be there to make comments to the commissioners that will be entered as part of the record. We didn't want to try to do that as a virtual meeting because it's very hard to manage the number of public comments that we would anticipate getting for a meeting such as that. In the meantime, the public can make written comments, and the website where they can submit written comments is at info@asevision.com. info@asevision.com. We'll be receiving these comments for quite some time. You don't have to send it today or anything. If you do submit written comments, you may still in the future do oral comments when we're holding the public meeting. There will be a lot of future steps. There will be public work sessions scheduled going in over the next months where we'll be debating the different recommendations. This is just the beginning of the process of the county commissioners hearing from the ASE Vision Committee what their recommendations are. It's their chance to present their results of their hard work that they have done. It's going to take the board a long time, I think, to process all this information. We may or may not agree with everything that the ASE Vision Committee is presenting to us. We are not going to just rubber stamp their report, but in looking through it, I think there are lots of parts that we probably are going to have universal agreement on them. This process we have gone through has really empowered the community to help us in looking at where we want our airport to go, the vision that we have for the airport. And we are going to consider all the recommendations that are made. We'll be asking a lot of questions, and our board members will be able to ask questions a little bit later from John Bennett and the other presenters from the Vision Committee. So right now, I'm going to pass it on to John Peacock, who is going to give us an introduction into the process that we are going through.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome everyone who is on this broadcast with us. This has really been an unprecedented public process. Going back now over 15 months, the board appointed 120 community volunteers to 5 airport advisory groups, 4 working groups, and the Vision Committee. And the working groups were more specialized in what they were looking at and provided advice to the Vision Committee, who then came up with the final recommendations that are being transmitted to the board today. In doing that, these 120 community volunteers participated in over 141 hours of public meeting. That included 63 working group meetings, 9 joint all-airport advisory groups, 18 Vision Committee meetings, 12 technical working groups, 12 community character working group meetings, 11 airport experience working group meetings, 10 focus group meetings. We had a large symposium on the future of aviation in a carbon-constrained world. And through all of these, we brought in 16 experts to present on various aspects and answer questions throughout the process, and conducted over 50 airport tours. All of those meetings, there was a huge amount of information and materials presented, reviewed, assimilated, and considered by all of these working groups. In all, on the ASEvision.com website, citizens can find over 214 items, including videos, audio recordings, presentations, reports, and reference materials that were considered by the working groups and the Vision Committee in making these recommendations. This board deliberately appointed a diverse group of community members to all of the committees. There was robust discussion throughout this process about community values, goals, technical data, and how all of this should be incorporated into common ground recommendations that are being brought to you and transmitted to you today. Everyone involved in this process put in a tremendous amount of effort, time, and talent. This is especially true of John Bennett, Meg Haynes, and Jackie Francis, who have been our citizen leaders on the Vision Committee, or as we've called them, our pilot, co-pilot, and navigator. They especially have spent a tremendous amount of time, in addition to all the other meetings that we've talked about. They met with us every week, oftentimes multiple times a week, to share in the leadership of planning and considering information that needed to be brought forward. Before I turn it over, I just want to note we have a quote from Albert Schweitzer in our building, who was the keynote speaker at the Goethe Bicentennial. And the quote is, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." It has been impressive. It's been humbling to be part of such a rigorous process that has really been citizen-led. It's an amazing demonstration of grassroots leadership and service by all 120 citizens. And I'm proud to be able to turn this presentation over to John Bennett to talk about the outcomes of this visioning process, and more importantly, the process that brought us to these common ground recommendations. With that, John, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. All right, am I on at this point? Terrific. John, thank you very much. Looking at your slides, it really brought home to me just how many meetings we've had in the last 15 months. It's been quite an extraordinary experience. So why do we call it the Common Ground Recommendations? When we began our airport planning sessions in February of last year, we didn't start off with technical issues like wingspans and runway taxiway separations. Instead, we asked questions about community values and goals, about sustainability, about our quality of life and the visitor experience. It was a fundamentally different kind of discussion about our airport future. We started with a deep dive into airport education. We had long sessions on flight safety, FAA regulations, valley growth rates, environmental issues, and airline operations. We organized a symposium at the Aspen Institute called The Future of Aviation in a Carbon-Constrained World. We also had an executive session to hear important legal advice from a leading national expert on FAA and airline negotiation. Early on, the 4 working groups in the Vision Committee identified key community values and goals for the new airport. These values and goals guided and informed the rest of our work, and we referred back to them continually. These were the 10 community values we thought should be reflected in our new airport. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through them all now, but I urge everyone watching to think about these in our report. We then expressed these values in 4 community goals. We want to enhance airport safety. We want to reduce greenhouse gas and other emissions by at least 30%. We want to reduce noise by at least 30%. And we want to manage enplanement growth toward an annual 0.8% target. And let me add that to eliminate any chance of peer pressure or employment playing a role in our decision-making, we established these numerical goals through secret voting, which we thought was important for everyone involved. Along with our education process and identifying values and goals, we divided up research projects among the 4 working groups, which contributed a huge amount of work and good ideas to our recommendations. And we then added our own research on top of their work. The result of that process is the airport we envision in our Common Ground recommendations. It achieves our core community goals and would offer travelers a unique and welcoming airport experience. It's also dramatically different from the plan in the 2008 environmental assessment. That airport would have been dirtier and noisier than today's airport. What we're proposing would be a lot less polluting and quieter. In fact, it's different enough to require a new EA process. To accomplish our 4 core community goals, our final report offers over 100 recommendations. I will run through just a few examples to give you a flavor of the whole thing. To enhance safety, we recommend increasing aeronautical spacing between airplanes approaching Aspen. This is a common sense measure that would make our sky safer. To reduce emissions, we propose charging a carbon-based landing fee and using the revenue raised to build a solar farm on airport property and subsidize the use of biofuels. Also, to reduce emissions, we'd replace so-called aircraft carrier parking, which we have today, with designated parking for private planes. This would allow us to ban the use of noisy, dirty auxiliary power units and create loud noise and fumes for our airport neighbors. We'd also make the terminal and all facilities net zero in their emissions. Some of our recommendations would help us with safety, emissions, and noise. For example, creating a peak congestion pricing plan for private planes and implementing a landing reservation system that would give airlines a better chance of landing on time. To manage our future airline employment growth, our plan reduces the terminal's gates from today's 8 down to 7, and that drops to 4 gates for larger airliners. This allows us to accommodate gradual, steady growth, but avoid the so-called cruise ship effect that would seriously erode our community character as well as the visitor experience. We propose negotiating with airlines to allow slightly larger aircraft, but only if new planes are significantly less polluting than today's CRJ 700, quieter than the CRJ, carry only 10 to 20% more passengers than our past airliners, and weigh less than 40,000 pounds. That eliminates the heavy metal planes like 737s. So it begs the question, do such planes exist? Well, they do, and here's an example, the new Airbus A220-100. It's been flying in Europe, and Delta just brought it to the US last fall. So how does the A220 compare? Its carbon emissions per passenger are 51% lower than today's CRJ 700. We think that's a huge deal. In flyover noise, it's also 3.6 decibels quieter than the CRJ 700, another very big deal. For reference, 3 decibels equals a 50% reduction in noise measured as sound pressure on the human ear. And this slide is really important because it's one of the reasons that airlines just might want to negotiate with us. The A220 carries 43% more passengers than the CRJ 700. Airlines can make a lot more profit with a more fuel-efficient plane carrying more passengers. But at the same time, the A220 carries only 9% more passengers than the old BA-146 that served Aspen for 20 years, and no one ever called that excessively large for our valley. So here's another plane. Because it's been much discussed, I want to talk briefly about the Mitsubishi new plane that might play a role in our future Aspen Airport. It's the Mitsubishi M100. It has never been built, but it's planned to have a wingspan of under 95 feet. So it could theoretically land at today's Aspen Airport if it is built and its performance is adequate. So here's what we know. Its big brother, the Mitsubishi M90, which has prototypes flying today, is about 17. It's been in progress for about 17 years. It is now 8 to 9 years behind schedule. Last month, excuse me, last month Mitsubishi replaced its CEO and launched M90 prototype number 10, which it hopes will win FAA certification. If it does, Mitsubishi will then turn its focus to the M100. On one hand, the smaller M100 would be a good backup plane to serve Aspen, especially in off-season. On the other hand, Mitsubishi lost $2.5 billion on this program last year, and they can't keep losing money forever on this. The bottom line is the M100 might be a very good plane, but it's really difficult to know when it could actually be in service. Mitsubishi is now saying 2024 or 2025, but we know that their track record on past predictions has not been exactly perfect. I think the most we can say is we just don't know. So community safeguards are another essential aspect of this plan. We hope that you'll adopt this plan by formal ordinance or resolution so that it couldn't be changed by a future Board of County Commissioners or future county management without a thorough public process. We also urge you to appoint a citizen advisory board to advise you on future airport questions. And third, we propose that you ask the airport to provide an annual report to you and the Citizen Advisory Board on progress made toward achieving the core community goals in this report. Are we reducing our emissions and noise, for example? Are we on track to hit all of our targets? So achieving our core community goals will require assembling strong baseline data on air pollutants and noise drawn from both modeling and on-site measurements. This could be done this year and next, long before new airport construction would begin. In future years, success will depend on a constant process of measuring and analysis, and those annual progress reports to you and your new Airport Advisory Board. Lastly, our new airport success will depend on offering a wonderful experience to our travelers. It should reflect our history and culture. It should embody the design excellence of our valley's heritage, and of course, it should be efficient. We envision a terminal that enriches the traveler's experience rather than burdening her with more stress. I want to end with what the final report calls our common ground vision. This is what our 100 recommendations are really aimed at, and it's what we hope different parts of our community will notice about the new airport. We hope that the airport's neighbors, for example at the North 40 and Buttermilk, will appreciate the airport's added safety and the fact that they don't smell it as much or breathe so many fumes as they do today. We hope they'll notice that the airport is quieter than before, with fewer peak hour flights. We hope they'll notice better ground connections around the airport. We hope our neighbors under the flight path farther down the valley will notice quieter skies, reduced pollution, and again, fewer peak hour flights, both commercial and private, to enhance safety and reduce the number of aircraft flying over their heads at the same time. We hope travelers, both locals and visitors, will appreciate safety enhancements, better airline reliability, a warm and welcoming terminal, an engaging, unique airport experience that reflects our community, and of course, improved ground connectivity to Aspen and Snowmass. I'm sorry, I'm a slide off, I apologize. This is hard to do in this context. So, for the community at large, we hope you will notice the many ways that our new airport enhances safety, protects the environment, and adds to our economic vitality and welcomes our visitors. Ultimately, the airport plan we're recommending to you is about our valley's quality of life and our sustainability. Environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and community sustainability. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I think next, John Peacock is going to put the map of the airport on the screen and give us an overview of that. And the map is part of the ASE Vision Committee report to us.
Okay, sorry, I was having trouble getting to my mute button and my screen all at the same time here. Oh, good Lord, it brought me all the way back. I apologize.
This is a complicated process, I
Catch
will
up
say.
here to John. Yeah, I thought I had done the work of getting it to the right slide.
There we go.
So, John Bennett, thank you. Steve, thank you. I think maybe one of the most important outcomes of this process is a recommendation that, as John Bennett had said, is very different from what was proposed originally in the environmental assessment. And I'll start off with the runway. In the original proposal, the runway was moving 80 feet to the west. The Vision Committee recommendation leaves the center line of the runway where it is, widening it for safety purposes. The good Lord, this very touchy.
Prayer is okay.
The recommendation then is to move the east side taxiway to the east to meet the full 400-foot separation that has been the topic of discussion for so much time. That has some implications for us on the terminal area. The terminal area moves farther to the east. The flex gate concept that John referenced is incorporated here. Our parking areas then need to be moved a little bit more to the north. You can see that rental car prep and stacking areas are on an area that is currently used for aircraft ramp. Economy and employee parking is in the green, commercial vehicle loading area, and then space for transit is reserved right in front of the terminal, so that it is the first mode of transportation that people either leaving the terminal to go into town or coming into the terminal. That is the closest space. Moving to the north, you can see there's significant changes proposed in the ramp area. You will see that smaller planes, these are private aircraft, are parked on the south. That is to reduce the impact to the North 40. You'll also notice that it's much more organized than what you would see today. And that parking in that fashion is required to do things like have power run to the airplanes and tempered air run to the aircraft so that they don't have to run their auxiliary power units, creating noise and emission impacts for our neighbors. Larger aircraft are proposed to move to the north so that they're moved farther away from any residents or businesses. The plan does maintain a transit rail corridor that could be used for any number of mass transit options that may be implemented by the municipalities and county in the future, and we've ensured to reserve that space so that it connects well with our transit area and the terminal. You'll also note that all parking areas include notes for solar and PV photovoltaic covers, as well as infrastructure for electric vehicle charging. You'll see the airport owns this property here. That is reserved for a solar farm to help meet the goals of being net zero on our facilities, and then stormwater quality. On the west side, then, one of the challenges when we have the parking in this fashion, where it's lined parking with specified spaces and infrastructure, the number of aircraft that you can park goes down. So in order to maintain capacity at today's levels, the Vision Committee has recommended that the county look at west side ramp space for our based aircraft. Those are our local pilots, what we call the patio shelters right now, with a service road that would access Owl Creek. There's also interest in analyzing further whether additional ramp space would actually reduce general aviation operations by allowing for parking and discouraging drop and goes, where if there's not a parking space available for a private aircraft, they will drop the owners off, and then the pilot will take back off again to find a place to hang or park the aircraft. This infrastructure layout is really designed to support all of the community goals around noise, around emissions, around having net zero facilities, but also having warm and welcoming facilities that meet our community's needs and reflect our community's values in terms of transit, environment, and the goals established by the Vision Committee around emissions, noise, and meeting the growth goals of the community. And with that, Steve, I will turn it back over to you for questions.
Okay, board members, do any of you have questions at this point that you...
Steve, you're muted, I think.
Okay, I think I'm good. Do any board members have questions that you would want to ask at this point of John Bennett or John Peacock about the map? So George first.
First of all, I just really wanted to thank and acknowledge John and Meg and Jackie for your leadership in this process, and certainly with all the committee members who've been involved as well. And I'll talk about that later on. But my question initially is, John, when you talked about the main shift in the thinking in regards to moving the runway or not, and the Vision Committee came up with some great ideas. My question is, that will probably have to be vetted by technical professionals, airport planners, to see if that is actually feasible to do.
Yeah, John, or George, we did have professionals contracted throughout this process as going through these recommendations. Obviously, all of these recommendations will take further conversations with our partners at the FAA, from the airlines on a national basis, to bring forward as the board adopts these plans. But all of those discussions provide a really exciting opportunity to open a dialogue with those partners and really up Aspen's game and really help us meet our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving safety at the airport, reducing noise, and enabling new technologies to help us do that. So yeah, there will have to be further conversations, but we think these are feasible recommendations, and we think they present an exciting opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I'll point out to the board, I'll get you in a second, Greg. We're going to have presentations by Valerie and Meg and Jackie, and they might answer some of your questions. So if you have immediate ones that you want to ask now, so go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to echo George, thanking Meg, John, Jackie, and all of the people in the community who put so much time and effort into this. The points that John Bennett made are still resonating. And he said things like, it would be essential, for their recommendation to go forward if we can get legally binding agreements for some of these things we're asking for, smaller airlines, maybe some sort of changes in the rules or regulations from the FAA. We have jurisdiction in some of these questions. I know those are going to come out and we're going to have the opportunity to speak about it, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate you being, very clear with us, as you have been, that these recommendations are coming with some caveats that are going to be pretty interesting for us to work out. And we're going to need advisors, and we're going to need help understanding just what all of that means. But I like where this is going. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Don't see any further questions right now. So now we're going to go to Valerie Braun, and she is going to give a minority report. which she has written. It's in part of our packet also. So Valerie, you have the floor right now. You'll need to unmute on the Zoom.
Hi there. I'm hopeful that the BOCC will read the written minority report in your packets. I intend to summarize my response today and not read the entire written report. I am the minority of one with regard to the vote taken by the Vision Committee on the recommendations for the redevelopment of the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. However, I am not a minority of one within the Roaring Fork Valley community. There is great concern in our valley with regard to the expansion of the airport and the impacts that expansion will have on our environment, lifestyle, economy, tourism, health, and well-being. I have attended every single meeting of the Aspen Vision Committee, all the whole group meetings, and all but one of the technical working group meetings. As we worked through this process, I felt it was my responsibility to represent the Woody Creek Caucus area. I have lived in the exact same location in Woody Creek for more than 47 years. No one 47 years ago could possibly have thought that Aspen Airport would evolve into the third busiest airport in the state of Colorado. No one could have predicted the explosion of privately owned jet aircraft or the exponential growth in charter, air taxi, and fractional ownership options. Since I did not have line item veto power, I could not in good conscience vote for the entire recommendation document when I had such strong concerns with regard to a couple of the recommendations. In my written report, I identified the approximately 80% of the recommendations I agree with and support. I hope you will read through my written minority report and note my comments. For the purposes of this meeting, I wanted to focus on the recommendations that caused my no vote. Transportation and connectivity. Although direction on transportation issues was not a specific charge from the BOCC with regard to the redevelopment of the airport, it is inconceivable that the size and scope of the airport redevelopment project would not have huge impacts on what is already an intolerable traffic situation on Highway 82. A method for arriving and departing passengers to get to and from the airport that is comfortable, efficient, and quick, and that removes airport-generated traffic from Highway 82 must be created. Whether that means a designated bus lane that parallels the highway, a gondola system, a light rail system, removal of the S-curves, a tunnel under the Merode open space, a transit center at Petke Park, an expansion of the Ruby Park Transit Center across the street to the outdoor ice rink, or any other possibility, this must be the priority project. The trip to and from the airport cannot take longer than the flight to Aspen. This will be challenging, time-consuming, and probably brain-bashing. However, it must be done. We cannot exacerbate the already unacceptable traffic problem with expansion and redevelopment at the airport, not to mention the potential of 200 or more dwellings at the lumberyard site and housing for CMC, all at the current pinch point on the highway. All these issues mean cooperation between elected officials and staff of the City of Aspen, Town of Snowmass Village, Pitkin County, RASTA, and hopefully with the inclusion of community residents, business community, and commuters' input. However connectivity is achieved, the focus must be on making public transport incredibly attractive. If we ever want to significantly reduce the number of vehicle trips to and from the airport with our shuttle service, it has to be of the highest level. I believe there should have been a very strong statement included in the Aspen Vision recommendations that a major master replanning of our transportation system must commence. I further recommend a multi-jurisdictional assessment of the overall issue of growth. If the aspirational growth of 0.8% with regard to commercial operations at the airport has any chance of attainment, there has to be containment of growth development for the entire county. The other concerning recommendation is the Runway Taxiway conundrum. The community has expressed over the decades that it doesn't want an airport that significantly increases growth or that allows aircraft that is too big for our valley. Although the ASE Vision Committee was told several times there would not be any new aircraft to replace the current CRJ 700 fleet, that has safely and efficiently serviced Aspen for the last 14 years, the fact that the scope negotiations have not moved the needle on the 76-seat cap for regional aircraft, and the knowledge that airline manufacturers misjudged this outcome leads me to believe we need to allow the industry to catch up with the reality that there needs to be aircraft that matches the size of the CRJ-700. It's not just Aspen that could use this type of aircraft, but regional airports all around the country need it as well. This has been made clear with recent orders by United for redesigned CRJ-550s, the news that Mesa Airlines, the 6th largest regional airline operator in the U.S. by fleet size, and it's the 3rd largest independent U.S. regional carrier, has committed to buy 50 Mitsubishi Space Jet M100s and optioned 50 more. And the fact that airline manufacturers Airbus and Embraer are looking to completely rethink what regional aircraft needs to be in the future. It is important to consider the old adage, bigger isn't always better. And the newer adage, if you build it, they will come. Aspen is different, special, unique, and yes, probably a little cranky when it comes to protecting what is ours. We want to maintain that identifying thing that makes us Aspen. We stand up for our environment, our lifestyle, what makes us different from any other place on Earth. During the last year, it became clear to many that there, in fact, may well be aircraft coming in the near future that would be scope compliant and under the 95-foot wingspan limit at the Aspen Airport. Mitsubishi Aircraft Corporation is developing a regional jet optimized for 76 seats, 91-foot, 4-inch wingspan, and takeoff weight under 100,000 pounds. This clean sheet design regional jet is the Mitsubishi Space Jet M100. It will provide 3 levels of service. It has overhead bin space for every passenger. It will be more fuel efficient, quieter, and have fewer emissions. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, parent company of Mitsubishi Aircraft Corporation, plans to acquire the Bombardier CRJ program and infrastructure, which includes the CRJ-700 variant. It is critical to good decision-making to understand the commitment Mitsubishi is making to the CRJ-700 program. Why not hear it straight from Mitsubishi Aircraft Corporation representatives? An understanding of where the Mitsubishi Space Jet M100 is as far as planning, production, and delivery could be directly explained to the BOCC and community. I am not a salesperson for the Mitsubishi Aircraft Corporation. I am simply pointing out that there is an aircraft compliant to our current airfield in the works. It is my understanding that Alex Seabolt from Flight Tech Engineering is working with Mitsubishi Air Corporation to obtain newly available technical and operational data for analysis. This is a good thing. The more information, the better. I believe that a recommendation put a stay on the final decision for expansion of the runway and taxiway would be a prudent one. The aircraft airline industry is in the midst of a flurry of innovation and potential new technologies that no doubt will promote the production of amazing new aircraft in the very near future. That, combined with our current COVID reality and the real possibility of a slow economic recovery, it would be a shame to rush to a decision that could have been avoided by not giving the industry time to design and bring to market aircraft that will meet the needs of safety, environmental improvements such as less emissions, quieter operation, fuel efficiency, which may very well include biofuel production to meet air traffic demands, and a high-quality passenger experience. This stay does not have to slow or stop the progress on finally fixing the transportation and connectivity issues that threaten our environment and mental health every day. It does not have to slow or stop the design work for our new terminal and transportation center at the airport. It does not have to stop the long-term planning and decision-making on the air side with regard to moving some or all of the FBO operations to the Owl Creek side of the runway, creating more breathing room for their operations and more room to work with on the highway side of the runway. It is important to acknowledge that commercial airline operations at the Aspen Airport account for 25% of overall operations. General aviation accounts for the other 75%. The county has significant control of the commercial side, but relatively little control on the GA side. The decisions we make for the runway and commercial operations will also be the decisions that could potentially increase operations on the GA side. Many members of the ASE Vision Committee and working groups believe we need bigger jets so there can be more direct flights to Aspen from additional cities. They also say that with bigger aircraft, there will be a reduction in the number of flights from the current service cities. This is a fair topic of discussion. I asked John Kinney for data regarding the number of commercial airline operations, arrivals and departures. He provided me with a chart that reports the number of commercial airline operations per week starting December 30th, 2018 through the week ending January 5th, 2020, a 53-week period. I think everyone would agree that the 2018-2019 ski season was wonderful. Early snow provided strong reservations throughout the winter. We did have extensive damage due to avalanches in the Castle and Maroon Creek valleys, but we did not have any fires in 2019. There was a glorious food and wine event, Ideas Festival, Music Festival, Dance Festival, and Jazz Aspen concerts. The summer of 2019 weather was great. The fall was the most spectacular in years. The national, state, and local economies were extremely strong. This time frame has to be considered a prime example of the best of four seasons in the Aspen area. It is unrealistic to describe a year's worth of operational data in this type of presentation. I urge you to look at the data chart in my written report that makes it clear there are really very few weeks during the entire year that market demand might make sense for airlines to use 125-seat aircraft. The entire rest of the year, our airport has significantly less market demand. Please take the time to digest what the data shows. There were really only 8 weeks during the 2019 practically perfect year where there might be justification for bigger aircraft. The rest of the year would not be financially feasible to the airlines to operate mainline jets at their increased operational costs. Is it worth it opening up the valley to more and bigger GA jet aircraft to accommodate so few busy weeks when we have been able to meet the market demand with the current 76-seat jet? Through more than an entire year of study, the Aspen Vision Committee never once heard concerns expressed that there were not enough seats on commercial airplanes. We never heard from the lodging, restaurant, or retail communities that visitors were complaining they couldn't get to Aspen. There is also the issue of traveler demands for frequent flight options. There is little chance of a significant change in the number of routes by airlines. When the idea of leaving the runway in its current location, no shifting, became the eventual recommendation by the Aspen Vision Committee, I thought this was an ideal way to be able to pause on the final decision on whether to widen and strengthen the runway. It's a bit of breathing room to determine the efficacy of the Space Jet M100 or any other potential CRJ replacement aircraft. And with the COVID issues, it gives the county time to determine if this project should even be considered in the near or distant future. Even with a pause on the decision on the runway, work could still begin on the planning and design for the new terminal and improvements of all the facilities, including the FBO, if the BOCC approves that portion of the project to proceed. Finally, in 1995, there was a county-wide vote taken specifically related to allowing bigger jets to operate in Aspen. It was more than a 2-to-1 vote against that kind of expansion. An act of Congress made permanent the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew. The citizens of Pitkin County saw this as a way to protect our way of life, the environment, slow growth, protect the ethos of Aspen, keeping Aspen and the upper Roaring Fork Valley a special space. The Aspen Vision Committee recommendations include the following statements: flexibility, adaptability, and skillful course corrections as needed will be essential to ensure the success of our future airport, reflect our character and values, provide a great traveler experience, and attain our long-term core community goals. I believe we can make Aspen Airport a world-class destination resort airport. It will be unique, efficient, a happy place to work. It will be easy to get to and leave from. Bags will come quickly to the claim area. There will be good food to eat and beautiful things to look at and learn about. It won't smell so awful at Buttermilk or the North 40, or the CMC building. Noise won't reverberate in the valley from Woody Creek all the way down to Old Snowmass. Travelers will say that now that Aspen has a new airport, it really is a perfect place to visit. And residents will say the quality of their lives has improved and the effect on the environment will be so limited, we will be able to be proud of our accomplishment. I would like to submit the text of this presentation for inclusion in the public record, and I thank you so very much for the opportunity to present another point of view.
Okay, Valerie, thank you very much for your report, and your comments will be considered along with all the other comments, given, you know, equal consideration by all of us. Greg, did you have a question or a comment? Okay. Okay, let's move on to Meg Haynes, our co-pilot. You don't have your goggles and things on, Meg, so I'll turn it over to you right now.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Valerie, for your perspective. During the past 14 months, Valerie has steadfastly and sincerely noted her concerns about our airport's futures, as have others. And the Vision Committee has indeed had thoughtful discussions about our varied, often controversial opinions. The 20-1 Vision Committee's March vote reflects, as John Bennett noted, our collective common ground recommendations. Everyone can read the comprehensive report using a link that will be provided on the ASE website. I would like, however, to mention two controversial topics that were not fully addressed in the report, but that were relayed in a cover note to the document: regional growth and valley transportation, both of which Valerie referred to briefly. We, the Vision Committee, do think that these two very important issues are beyond the defined scope of our airport objectives. However, let's talk a little bit about regional growth. Throughout the 14-month public process of discussing the airport's future, overarching questions related to regional growth, because so many, like I, think the Valley's regional growth issues deserve concentrated focus, the Vision Committee recommends that the BOCC initiate a community-wide forum to provide a compass for future growth decisions related to infrastructure and other needs. So that is a strong recommendation. Also, Valley transportation was a comprehensive topic that the focus group addressed. Much like regional growth, the issues related to Upper Valley transportation connectivity, especially airport connections to Aspen and Snowmass, arose repeatedly during our deliberations. The Vision Committee's report does offer a number of recommendations aimed at creating seamless ground connectivity for the airport. However, while ultimate solutions to our valley's transportation and mobility challenges have been debated for decades and were beyond the scope of today's report, the Vision Committee also urges the BOCC to reinvigorate this important discussion and to work with other elected bodies and RAFTA to identify and implement workable solutions to that challenge. So those are my comments. Jackie, you have some additional comments?
Unmute, Jackie. Jackie, you need, there you go.
There we go.
That's good.
All right. I'm here.
Welcome,
okay, so I
Jackie.
just want to say that at this point, the committee consensus was that we do feel this process does need to move forward. And as the BOCC is sifting through our recommendations, if you wonder why we made a recommendation, feel free to ask us. I can assure you we have an explanation. We did a lot of homework. I'd like to reiterate that our community goals were top priority. And I want to thank the BOCC for embarking on this comprehensive community process. And I think you'll be pleased with this report. I'm very proud of it. And I'm a local business owner and a very close neighbor to the airport. So our recommendations brought a lot of diverse people to the common ground. So now we're ready to get to your questions.
Okay, this is a chance, our big chance for commissioners to ask lots and lots of questions. So Kelly, you go first. You're muted now.
Muted now. Sorry.
There you go.
I said I'll ask, and then there's a chance, and then maybe I'll ask a few more. But I did want to ask, since we're talking about the very kind of broad scope right now of reviewing the process and how we got to essentially the 4 goals that you came to that we discussed today, and then the additional 15, I would say, detailed recommendations that we didn't review today, but we will get to in the future. Do you feel like in the course of this process, so I have 2 questions related to this, that the diversity of representation was such that all stakeholders and voices were represented and heard? And then my second question would be, do you feel like you had access to all of the information that you needed in order to come to your recommendations?
So I think, John, if you would be the main one to
Well, I'll start, but I welcome
tackle
others.
that one, but then Jackie and Meg, also, if you are really feel more qualified than John to answer any of the questions on, or if you want to tag on after he speaks. Go ahead, John.
Jackie and Meg are both more qualified in many areas. So I'll start. I think first, Kelly, to your question about were all segments of the community heard, I would say yes. And I say that because the Vision Committee itself had a tremendous amount of diversity. Obviously, we had Woody Creek neighbors on our committee. I say obviously because Valerie just spoke and she's one of them. But we also had, people from the North 40 and people from West Buttermilk and people from downtown Aspen and people from Down Valley. And we had a pretty darn, diverse group when you boil it down. And we also had major business leaders of the Valley in our group. So we had a little bit of everything. And it was a lively conversation. The fact that we came to, a pretty good agreement at the end of it should not lead anyone to think that that it was all easy. There were lively discussions. There were full and frank debates. People voiced their views. I think it's really testimony to the good faith of the group that we all stuck with it for 15 months and without any major attrition at all. People stuck with it and they kept listening. I think the secret of this was listening. People listened and listened and listened. And frankly, we tried to set it up so they'd have lots of opportunities for listening. And through all that listening, we did in fact find common ground, not on every single issue, but on certainly the great majority of them. And now I have forgotten your. Oh wait, go ahead. Yes, I see your hand waving, Jackie.
And I was going to just add to what John said: is people didn't just listen; they spoke.
Yes.
I mean, we went around the table all very, very many times and listened to everybody else's. We never let anybody not speak. Everybody had to say what they were thinking on everything, and there was a lot of feedback from many, many angles of this community.
Thank you for saying that. When I said we really did a lot of listening, I meant listening to each other, and I should have said that. I don't mean listening to speakers from the outside. We did that too. But the most important listening was to each other.
Okay. The second question, John, had to do with, did you have all of
the information?
Information.
I'll say all the information that exists. There were certainly questions we would ask that from now and then, time to time, that were beyond anybody's ability to answer. We all wish we had a crystal ball, you know. But I think, no, we had some pretty good information resources available. Whenever someone in the group would pose a question that nobody in the room had an answer to, John Peacock or another would say, "We'll get back to you on that." And they would go off and research it, and they'd send a memo out to some consultant somewhere in the nation. And we'd get a technical, usually these are technical questions, and we would get an answer back, and we would talk about the answer and just fold that right into our thinking. So we were extremely well supported.
Okay.
And I'm going to
Jackie?
add again to John's comment as well that the things that are unknown, which there are some things that are unknown, we did our best educated research and assessment of what we felt would be things that we can't figure out. And I do this a lot with with statistics and probability, and you try and figure out what the future is going to look like based on educated guesses. And there were some things that we had to use the experts' scenario planning, and that was something that we really spent a lot of time looking into.
Okay. Kelly, more questions? Okay. Other commissioners?
Thank you.
I don't see any. Patty?
John, this is maybe John Peacock, I don't know. I know the 2018 EA was mentioned, and there's a question in my mind: do we have to, if we were to go with this recommendation for the new design of the runway, would we then have to go back and reopen that EA, or do a new EA, or where would we be in that process?
So it would definitely require a NEPA process, Patty, particularly for the west side recommendations of the development. Whether that's a new EA or reopening our existing EA or an amendment to that EA, we still have to have those conversations with our federal partners. We wanted to make sure that these recommendations were transmitted to the board and that we are getting direction before we go too far down any of those roads.
Okay, and let me add to that.
But it will require a process,
All right,
for
so
sure.
if we were to have to either reopen or start anew, there's some time in there. We know it takes some time to do a NEPA or environmental assessment. Therefore, if we were to move forward with this recommendation, we have some time to really address the runway issue where we could still then possibly proceed with the terminal. I'm just looking at Val's concern about, all these other factors and, maybe delay is not such a bad thing. And I'm thinking some of the processes we may have to go forward with may in fact create some time. That's just kind of my thinking right now. So thank you.
Okay, may I add to that?
You certainly can.
Sure, John.
We talked about that a great deal, and phasing became a major topic of conversation. We say some words about, we have some recommendations about phasing in the final report, and I'll say that beyond what's in there, there's some really important and good ideas that you will all talk about phasing. I'll just leave it at that.
Well,
but you're right.
you.
You're right.
And
That's
I
important.
am a big supporter of phasing and also of doing something that provides you the opportunity, which is also in this, to build it now with the thought of we may need X, Y, or Z in the future. And if we were to come to that point, we wouldn't have to rip everything out and start over again. We could just incrementally add on or remodel or without having to start at ground zero again. And I think that was brought up in this. So I think that gives us some area to talk about and to talk with the community about, how do we move forward on one side and still keep thinking about the other issues. Thank you.
So, John and Megan, Jackie, I'm thinking about some of the details of what the terminal might look like. You went into some description of what the the jetway might or might not look like. But you didn't, in your summary, you didn't really talk about the bigger design thing of
I
what
know.
might the terminal look like. Besides the feel of it, you described that very well.
Well, I was trying to keep my presentation down in time.
But did you, I
It could have been
presume
much
you
longer.
discussed that
Oh, yeah.
at
Oh,
great
yeah.
length? And you did make a recommendation on it in your
We did.
full report.
We have a lot of recommendations in the report about qualities the new terminal should have. Now, we did not cross a line and start designing a new terminal, picking the paints on the interior, and that was, we knew when to, I think we knew when to stop. But we certainly talked at great length about, let me just mention a few examples. Though we didn't design the terminal, we did mostly talk about making it 2 stories. And one reason, because several reasons for 2 stories. One is it's a more efficient building mass. If you care about energy sustainability and all that, it's easier to make a 2-story building net zero. But another is that to my enormous surprise, I came into this process 15 months ago not being a fan of jetways.
I'm not, that's where
I know. Listen, it took me a long time to come around on this. We ended up endorsing jetways. Now we're calling for, of course, it's the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. We're calling for unusual jetways.
Open air jetways.
Open air jetways, exactly. So that you can, whether they're have a top on them to keep the snow, but their windows open windows on the side. Who knows what they look like? But the important thing about jetways, there is a safety factor. They are safer than people coming down icy ramps in the winter in a blizzard. We will have fewer slip and falls with jetways. So, but there's another really important issue that I don't think any of us, I certainly didn't know anything about coming into this, and that is the important role they play in getting airliners to stop using their noisy, dirty, polluting auxiliary power units. If we have jetways, and this is the way other airports do it apparently, you run the big thick electrical cable on the bottom of the jetway, and that brings both tempered air and electricity right out to the plane, and it just plugs in when it pulls up to the jetway. They attach the walking ramp to the plane at the same time somebody down below is hooking up these vents and big cables. That is really huge because one of the biggest complaints from neighbors like the ABC, the Airport Business Center in the North 40, is smelling and listening to those APUs that can go on for hours and hours during the day, both private planes and commercial airliners. So that's an example. So that's a long-winded way of saying that's why we're talking about a 2-story terminal. But other things are, from a character point of view, more important, and that is the group at different committees like the Character Committee and the Airport Experience Committee went fairly deep into ideas about how to walk into this terminal and feel like we don't want it to feel like a museum, but we do want it to feel like, wow, there's history in this place. You can walk in, and whether you're listening to an app on your cell phone that is giving you a story as you walk through it, or whether you're in a waiting lounge and they're, instead of a big video selling you expensive jewelry and $20 million homes, there might be a video on the wall about the mining era, the quiet years, the Goethe Bicentennial, the birth of the modern Aspen with all of its culture, the history of skiing. There could be all this stuff that gives you a flavor and a feel for what this Upper Valley is really about and what makes it special. So there are a lot of things like that. And then in just pure terms of comfort, we would love to see waiting rooms that feel like private airport clubs, only they don't need to be private clubs. I mean, they could be comfortable. You guys are already doing a good job of that in the outside area where there's more room. But the gates themselves could be large and spacious. Each gate could actually have the number of seats that an airplane pulling up to the gate has, so that you could actually seat everyone in great comfort. There could be somebody walking around and asking, would you like a cappuccino? Would you like a glass of Chardonnay? Whatever it is. So make the place comfortable, welcoming, different from other airports. Give it a uniquely Aspen-Pitkin County snowmass, feel and flavor. And just make it special is what we really want to do. And have great wayfinding and information systems, great, well, I won't go on, but you guys.
Okay, okay, thank you, John.
Other people should
I
talk
saw
about
that
this.
Kelly had a hand up, but I wanted to tag
so,
on to John too.
George, you had your hand up, and Kelly has your hand up. George?
Okay, well, Patty wants
I just want to tag
Patty
on
wants
to
to
John
tag
real
on
quick.
to John's comment.
Yeah, John, and I appreciate that extra information about the jetways and being able to plug them in. It's just, it goes back to when my son was little and getting off the plane and him taking a deep breath and looking around at the mountains and going, Mom, it's just so good to be home. So that always
We
strikes
want to
me.
retain that.
Yeah, and
We are
that's
hoping to
important.
retain that.
And
yeah.
another thing really quick, we always have to keep in mind that those big advertisements in the airport
Pave the
really
way.
are funding the way.
I know,
For
I
those
know.
cappuccino servers.
I
So
know,
we have to
I
keep
know.
that in
There'll be
mind.
there's always a tension. I know, I know.
Thanks, John. Thanks, George.
Okay, George?
Oh, he's not me.
Okay, I want to, yeah, thanks, Steve. I want to go back to the future for a minute here and how we got to where we are today, and then ask the committee a question that's pertinent to that. So 10 years ago, we started to update the airport layout plan. And we thought that was going to be a pretty simple process, and we got that done with consultants. But what that led to was all of a sudden we said, well, we better have a study with looking at the current and the future aircraft. And what will that mean in regards to this airport layout plan? And so then that led to this discussion in terms of what we currently have with the modification of standards that the FAA has given us, including what Valerie mentioned was our unusual curfew. And so my question is, and a lot of the public who are watching this may not really realize what that modification of standards means, what that sort of puts us in between some bookends in terms of future use of the airport. So I just want to ask John or Meg or Jackie, how much of that discussion looked at the modification of standards and what that would mean if we were able to move to a Class 3 airport versus what we currently have as sort of modifications that would probably revert back to a Class 2 airport.
Jackie or Meg, either of you want to?
John, it's Meg. I'm saying John's probably our airplane guru. So John, why don't you answer that first?
Okay.
New title for you.
Yeah, right.
Bennett.
I'm definitely not an I mean, I know a lot more about aircraft today than I did 15 months ago, but I don't call myself a guru or expert. Yes, George,
Well,
sorry?
just not to interrupt you, but it's not so much the aircraft, but the
I
whole
understand.
idea in terms of the modification of standards
The Group 3.
and what that means if we do or don't go ahead.
Yeah. So, of course, you're absolutely right. And that was a huge area of discussion along the way. We got to that towards the end, I will say. We didn't start off with that. And that was very purposeful. We wanted to start off with values and goals, our vision, aspirations for the airport, aspirations for the Upper Valley community. And then, and ask ourselves, how do we get there? We've set these goals, we have this vision, how do we get there? And then we sort of walked through the steps that would be necessary to achieve the goals we had set for ourselves. And that led us inevitably right into the discussion, as we knew it would, of, what kind of group, what airport do we want to be? I mean, today we're a Group 3 with modifications. So what these recommendations essentially would lead to today we're a Group 3 airport with modifications. So we would still be a Group 3 airport with modifications, but the modifications would be different. We would lose the modification that currently restricts wingspans to 95 feet. We would not lose other modifications like the one that exists to allow us to have a sloped airport, a sloped runway that's 100 feet higher at one end than the other end. So there'd still be modifications. On the other hand, there'd be a new set of conditions, and the conditions would not be through FAA modifications to standards. The new conditions would be those legally binding contracts we talk about with the airlines, with the FBO. We'd also have to work with the FAA on some of our recommendations. We think that's doable, but it's got to be done. So there are still, call them whatever you want. They're not modifications, but there would be contractual agreements, long-term. They should be many years into the future with airlines that affect what they can bring in. So the restriction, for example, the most obvious one that everybody always asks about, the most obvious one is the larger airplanes, Airbus A320s and 737s and stuff like that. In theory, if we do away with the modification to standards that restricts airliners to 95-foot wingspans, in theory, those planes could then land. However, they could not if the organizations that fly them, the airlines, were under legally binding restrictions that say you can't do that. And if they agree to that voluntarily through negotiations with us, we are told that's perfectly legal. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's kind of the way we talked about it, and that's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Is it possible for me to chime in on that? It's Valerie.
Valerie, we want to give it, I'm going to say no right now. We still have to there's a lot of other people who aren't on the screen who are on the Vision Committee, and we want to give them all a chance to speak also. So we really need to keep moving on.
Well, hopefully this is a discussion that will continue because there's a lot more information that I think is valuable. Thank you.
Absolutely, it is. This is just the beginning of the discussion. This is not the end of it. And Valerie, you'll have, I think, plenty of opportunity in the future to add further comments.
Steve, because Mike Kaplan, I think, has to leave, is there any way we can slide him in here? I know Kelly has a...
Yeah, Kelly.
Oh, well, sorry, Mike.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks. And this discussion leads right into my question a little bit because I'm a little concerned. Well, I'm a little concerned that the public tuning in for the first time may be confused where we're at in the conversation, and so I just want to bring us back. That what we've been presented today is the 4 goals of the airport vision that came out of the airport vision process, and I think these are the goals that probably on their face are not super controversial. We're talking about safety, pollution reduction, managed growth. However, when we get into the details of the common ground recommendations, I think that that's where some of these questions and discussion related to JetBridge, related to modifications, that's where the meat of this conversation is really going to start. And so since we're not looking at that today, I just would like to check in with John Bennett and John Peacock. What does it look like? When are we going to receive kind of that presentation of recommendations in a way that the public is going to also hear what we hear? And, what is the Vision Committee's role in that and in being able to sort of flesh out all of those details?
Yeah, Kelly. So maybe, John, unless you want to jump in and answer that one, I'll that one. So obviously, I think before COVID-19, we had envisioned a larger public forum, being able to put more experts in the room and have maybe more kind of concurrent decision-making and opportunities for the board to ask questions. So everything kind of changed. Actually, ironically enough, on the day that the Vision Committee took their vote was March 10th, when we really started into our COVID-19 crisis also. But what that means is we'll be looking for some direction. We wanted to transmit the recommendations and the report. So there is I think, a fairly detailed report and backup documents that's being transmitted to the board. There are some follow-up recommendations from the Vision Committee for conversations and basically additional data around what John's talking about, conversations with the airlines and with our FAA partners to see what we can accomplish in terms of meeting these community goals and bringing those back. And so it's difficult to give you an exact time frame right now because I think we owe the public that larger convening, but we can do some of this groundwork, I think, now between now and then to have our conversations with the FAA, have our conversations with the airlines pursuant to the Vision Committee's recommendation, as long as the board is comfortable going down those paths, bring that information back into a larger public conversation with the board where, you know, I think it's the desire of the Vision Committee that this be memorialized in a resolution or such that would require another public hearing if it were to be changed. So there will be more public process and more information coming back. We will, I think, be able to give timelines once we have a better sense of when we can have larger group gatherings again.
So,
Thank you. I appreciate
oh, go ahead, Kelly.
people watching to be like, where did the jet bridge conversation come from? Where did the
First and foremost.
conversation come from? Because we're getting ahead of that a little bit right now.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I really do appreciate everything that's been said so far. Val, thanks for being in there and hanging in there. We hear what you're saying. We hear what Meg and John, Jackie, what everyone is saying here, and it's really important and valuable information. John Peacock said something that's clearly it's on all of our minds because we've given probably 90% or 80% of our time to it recently, and that's what the governor said yesterday. Things aren't going to be the same after this pandemic. There are some things that will never change. So when we're designing a terminal or designing transportation, anything like that, we're going to be thinking about post-COVID-19 scenarios for social distancing and hygiene and sanitation and all these things. And I'm sure that will go into the design. I would love it if John Bennett or whoever's driving the slideshow could put the community safeguard page up again. I wanted to catch another look at that if possible. I do think that before we can have another public meeting due to the virus, I think it would be great to continue and find out just how likely is it that we can negotiate with the FAA or negotiate with the airlines in any meaningful way.
This is on.
If they're going to do what we say, they're probably going to have to change their entire fleet to accommodate being able to fly. And those are the big questions. How likely is this that these recommendations we're going to ask them to make are going to happen? I think we're somewhere in there in this page. It was just talking about the assumptions we were going to making and the conditions upon which this recommendation is being made to us. So I keep going back to it. What assumptions are we making and how likely are they of actually happening? I hear the FAA is pretty hard to negotiate with, and I guess the airlines are probably pretty hard to negotiate with also.
Legally binding.
So that's where I am on it, but I do think we should pursue that and give it a shot.
Better go back to him. It's going to take me a minute.
Okay.
While they're getting the slide up, with the unless airlines are bound to us by contract to fly only a certain type of airplane in here, we don't know if we would recommend this, is kind of what I thought I heard. So I want to be clear that I know what the recommendation is and what the conditions are. If you could reiterate those.
So, John, you going to be ready?
I'm sorry.
Ready to answer soon, or we could do another question
We
in
better
the
do
meantime.
something else. If he wants that slide.
Yeah, another question. I can hold that question.
Yeah.
Okay, there is,
I think we're starting to lose some of our other Vision Committee members who may want to make some comments too. So I just want to remind everyone we've got got them.
Sure,
Yeah.
you can keep going. I just wanted to get those questions in.
So,
Yeah.
so there is a question that Roger Nicholson asked, and it was actually a question that I had too. So I'm going to quote, he had to leave the call, but he did type in a question. What happened to the deadline for FAA funds that seemed to exist for many months? The sense of urgency seems to have evaporated. So John, do you want to
Well,
tackle that one?
I think we had, sure. And no, the FAA is reminding us of kind of their timelines and their planning for funding and grant dollars for any improvements that we can reach agreement on. Frankly, we have competing urgencies right now. Our world really did get turned upside down, I think, for all of us, about 5 weeks ago now. And so we have continued to be in conversations with the FAA. They are watching this process very carefully and are, anxious, I think, for us to reach a path forward. And we've had to ask for some grace because, to be perfectly honest, this is, the COVID response has really redirected a lot of our attention. And so it is still an urgency for the FAA. We've been asking for some grace, and they are still very interested in bringing this planning process to a conclusion.
Okay, thank you. John Bennett, are you ready with,
I have that slide if,
okay, why don't you put
if
that
that's
up?
helpful. Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I'm not good at this system because I never used it before. So I go to share screen.
We'll talk you through it.
I need talking through this. And now,
If you'll click back on this presentation.
okay, oops.
And then down there.
Which one? That one? Okay. Voila. So here, Greg, are those community safeguards. And your question, I'm sorry, took me a while to get that slide. I apologize. Can you restate the question you'd like us to specifically address regarding these safeguards?
Well, I'm just, the big question that always comes up is, what's the likelihood that the FAA or the airlines are actually going to consider our little piece of the world's concerns when they're looking at nationwide or global airline fleets, and FAA is looking at I don't know how many airports there are in the country, but there are thousands, right? So what's the likelihood, is the question I have going forward, that we're going to get anywhere, because we really don't have jurisdiction, as I understand it, over what aircraft can be used, or so I just wanted to highlight that, because that's always the question. You're essential to this plan. At the top of this, it says is, that we can, maybe this isn't the exact right slide, but it was about
Right.
what we have to get from the FAA and the airlines to make something go forward.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, no question, this depends on negotiations, and we state that very, very clearly in the final report. And we also say, as you know, if the negotiations are not successful, if our aspirations are not attainable in agreements with airlines, then we invite the BOCC to come back to the Vision Committee, and because this plan would no longer work. And we would invite you to come back to us, and we will, in short order, because we know the choices now, wouldn't take a long time. I think very quickly we would vote and give you a different alternate recommendation. Now, to the question of how likely is it, no one knows the answer to that. I say that with some certainty. We've certainly talked to different legal authorities about this, legal experts, and the person we spent the most time with, who knows the most about this, who has the greatest experience in negotiating with airlines, his opinion was, yeah, this is worth a shot. Did he say this is a slam dunk, you'll get it for sure? Absolutely not. Or did he say it's totally impossible? He didn't say that either. He said, you know, you have a very interesting case here. The airlines certainly are interested in Aspen. You have some things to offer them that would, including an airplane like the A220-100 that seats more people and is way more efficient. They'd make more money off it. And we can offer them amenities in the airport. We can offer them airline clubs and, you know, gates that they could quasi-own that kind of look and feel like airline clubs. And we have a long list of things that we could offer them, and some I don't really want to talk about because they're confidential legal advice. But we certainly have a good grounds for negotiation, and that's all we really know. But the only other thing I would add, I mean, without trying, that's all we can know. The other thing I would add is there would be no harm whatsoever that we've been able to identify to trying. So we take 60, 90 days and we go out and we try to negotiate with the airlines. If we fail, well, we've lost 60 or 90 days that happened to be in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis when not much was going to happen anyway. But we're right back to where we started from, and we can then choose a different direction and change our recommendation. There is, I'm going to just repeat that, there's zero downside to going out and talking to the airlines. There really is a lot possibly to gain and nothing at all to lose, in our opinion.
Okay.
Thank you for that. That's good to hear it.
No, I just know that Mike Kaplan had left some comments, and we might.
Yeah, now, Mike, are you still on, Mike Kaplan? He had to go, his mother's 80th birthday party to go to.
Zoom party.
Andrew, do you have a way to see if someone is raising their hand or something of those, the Vision Committee members who are on?
Yeah, but I think
Okay.
Mike Kaplan left comments out on John Peacock.
Okay, so let's go to Jackie Merrill then.
And I'm sorry, I don't know how to get us back to where we started. There we go. Thank you.
So Jackie, we just unmuted you. Yep, perfect.
So Jackie, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, I've had some really interesting conversations with myself and some other people on the Vision Committee, all of whom I have tremendous respect for, around the COVID virus and how that changes not only timelines but priorities. And I just wanted to say that our navigators and pilots know very well that I was hoping to delay some of this process in the interest of getting more information. I certainly voted. I did not vote with Val, though I came very close to it, and I am now in a situation where I certainly don't want to change my vote, but I think I'm considering changing my mind. And part of that has to do with with the fact, and it hasn't been mentioned, but I guess everybody knows that Mitsubishi now owns the rights for the maintenance of the 700. And, you know, one of the places when someone asked, do we have all the information we wanted, I have never been satisfied that I have personally all the information I need about the Mitsubishi. Primarily what Mitsubishi or whoever would be maintaining the 700, they claim, until the 100 is ready and certified. Really, how credible that is and what kind of a commitment that involves. And so I'm a little confused about that. And so I wanted to say that go on record as being somewhere, not exactly where I voted, but not exactly where I didn't vote. And given the COVID virus and the economic issues of our valley and of the whole country, it seemed to be reasonable to delay somewhat the timeline so that we have more information that we didn't have before when we voted and when we were meeting. So I just wanted to say that I appreciated Greg saying, Greg, at the last commissioners meeting, that you wondered if some of our assumptions should be revisited, some of the shifting ground should be looked at. If in fact, for instance, Mitsubishi can retain and keep in operation the requisite number of 700s until perhaps the Mitsubishi is available, doesn't it make sense, instead of going forward at this time, I'm not saying we never should, by lasting, postponing some of our opinions, some of our recommendations or altered recommendations until we have more information about that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Let's see. I guess if any commissioners want to weigh in at any time, like a short response to anybody or a follow-up question, do so. But right now, Andrew, does anyone else on the phone have their hand up? And if not, I will just go down the list, I think, and just call names. So, Tom Melberg. You have the mic now.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you all, County Commissioners. I appreciate it. I really want to thank you for providing the funds and the creation of the ASE Vision process. It's been, the past 15 months has been a real revelation in so many regards, and yet I feel that there are still crucial issues to be resolved. At the very first meeting, I proposed a question that I thought the runway expansion would be a growth generator stemmed by direct flights from New York City, Boston, Newark, and Miami. And how could our community get an understanding of what that growth might be? John Peacock surprised me by saying not everyone would agree that the direct flights would generate a growth for the community. And I was somewhat taken back by this response, but later heard the staff had discussed whether direct flights might facilitate growth but not generate growth. And that sounded like semantics to me, but I stayed with the process to see how it would be addressed. Thereafter, I raised the growth issue throughout the process ad nauseum. I'm sure everyone would agree of the Vision Committee. And every proposed solution to controlling the growth was shot down until the committee agreed that a flex gate system and a legally binding agreement with the airlines to a specific aircraft, or at least eliminating some aircraft, would control our community's growth concern. I am still not convinced the airlines will not be able to arrange gate times to accommodate more flights when our airport gates would be available. I also would say that Valerie's information, pertinent information about how many seats are actually being, filled throughout our year, gives me pause to think that with the larger commercial aircraft coming in order to make it feasible for the large aircraft to come in, they would sell these seats at a discount, and then I would say that would be a growth generator. But please take more, I would like more answers on that. But more importantly, which has been discussed, there has been additional information about the biggest commercial stakeholder now servicing the Pitkin County Airport since we concluded our ASE Vision process. As has been stated, Mitsubishi owns and operates the CRJ 700 currently serving Aspen. Mitsubishi is developing a scope-compliant, 95 wingspan-compliant aircraft to continue their service to Aspen. They have the biggest, what did John say, $2 billion invested in this, over 17 years of working on it. So they've really committed a lot of money and time, and seems like they're getting at towards the end of their, hopefully the end of their process. So I would like to think that the VOC would consider having a presentation, getting more information from the Mitsubishi. Valerie pointed out our connectivity to and from the airport to be outside the scope of the ASE and Vision committee process. We all know the present solution is not working with 3,500 cars coming in into Aspen via McLean Flats Road due to the vehicle congestion on Highway 82 from the airport to town. And CDOT has given the roundabout a D rating, and the Castle Creek Bridge can't hold 3 inches of blacktop over it because it won't meet CDOT safety standards. APCHOC has proposed upwards of 500 dwellings across from the airport, along with another phase at Burlingame. CMC is proposing a housing aspect of their campus across from the airport. And with the projections at the airport of having more people arriving and departing on planes with 120, 130 people on board, this connectivity of this last frontier into Aspen, in my opinion, has to be resolved, and I would say everybody would like to have it resolved. So I urge the DOCC to not sidestep this critical junction for the environmental, mental health, and safety of our valley citizens and visitors. I think it's paramount for the connectivity from the airport to Aspen to be resolved and worked on while these other projects are ongoing itself.
Okay, Tom, we need to move on, and Greg Postman has his hands up to follow up on that.
I just had a question. I want to clarify, Tom. You said Mitsubishi has the biggest stake. I assume that if they're maintaining the CRJs and all that, but really, doesn't this have more to do with the airlines owning the routes? I've never heard of Mitsubishi actually having a stake in what we're doing at the airport. So I'm a little confused on, is it the airline or is it the aircraft manufacturer we need to have speak to us? Thanks.
I would suggest that it be the Mitsubishi, because they have the impetus to keep the CRJ 700 operating until they can get their new fleet of jet in that would service us. So I would suggest that would be Mitsubishi.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom, for your comments. Going back to Andrew, is anyone else?
I see, Tom, they have some hands up there.
Let's go to John Sarpa. Go ahead. He's still muted. Go ahead, John.
No, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes. We've all been through many different reviews. This one, like my colleagues, was an eye-opening one for me, and I appreciate you all taking the time to let the community weigh in, because you certainly could have gone forward some time ago on your own. I wanted to talk about the kind of compromise, though, that I saw at work, because there were a lot of compromises that took place, and I'm not sure that's coming through here in even this first meeting, but the questions of growth and size and what do we do with the FAA, if you will, breathing down our neck and so forth. And over 15 months, I thought we came out with some really creative, and in fact, I know one-of-a-kind ideas. Like you said, Greg, who knows whether or not they'll fly, but we have reason to believe, both with the FAA and with the airlines, because I happen to believe it's the airlines, not Mitsubishi or somebody else, that are the keys here, because they own the routes. But I have a reason to believe that given the viability and the strength of our market, that we've got a lot of leverage, even with the FAA and or the airlines, to achieve things. So when we were asked to vote on things like having a targeted growth rate, that was a big discussion. And I might say that coming up with 0.8 made some people nervous both ways, too low, too high. So your community really took a long time through that process to look at that. By putting that in place, and then imagine this, we're recommending going to fewer gates than we have today. I mean, that too was a discussion. We have 8 gates today. So going to 7 gates was a big deal, because it is one of the things we can control, and it is one of those levers that we have. So when you look at that, and then adding things like weight limits and other things that we don't know how they'll fly, but if the package we presented, or something close there too, is acceptable both to the FAA and to the airlines, we absolutely should go forward now, because as you know, there's kind of a critical time period, and we're in it for sure, that you just took 15 months, hundreds of people, thousands of hours, and there's yet a process that you're going to go through. But at the end of that process, I know it's the best thing for our community to go forward with, if you will, the balance that I hope you'll come out with at the end of your process, and do that sooner than later. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Let's see, Andrew, I think that Thomas Friedstein has your, did you still have your hand up? Let's have you next.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for this opportunity, and just join with my other members who have commented what a great process this has been. I just want to briefly let you know that not everybody disagrees with our report. I think it's critically important that we build this new runway as long as we can get the provisos that are our recommendation 12, which will limit the kind of airplanes that can operate here. I think that's critically important. And the reason I say this is the new airplanes have a larger wingspan, which makes them more efficient and less polluting and quieter. And we need to move to that. But it's very important that we don't allow the big, noisy, polluting planes that we're all afraid of landing here. And so recommendation 12, which has been said before by many other people today, but the listing of our recommendations where we limit the kind of planes that can operate here, which are going to come through agreements with the airlines primarily, is critically important. And if we can't get that, then yes, we have to rethink everything. But I also think it would be unwise to put all of our future into one aircraft. The only aircraft in the world that's being proposed that could operate here with a 95-foot wingspan, the Mitsubishi M100. If we widen the runway with the provisos that we won't allow polluting and heavy planes to operate here, then the Mitsubishi plane could operate here. But we shouldn't be in a position ever again where our physical runway configuration limits us to only one aircraft, because what happens if that aircraft stops operating, or what if the airlines don't want to run it? So I just want to again reinforce that the recommendations, recommendation number 12, where we itemize the negotiations need to take place to build a bigger runway, but to limit the type of aircraft that can operate here, is critically important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And we only have about 10 minutes left. I want to try to get through if any other Vision Committee members want to speak. Are any more hands raised right now, Andrew? So Stan Clausen, you will be unmuted here. Just a second. Okay, I think you're good.
Hello, I am unmuted. I have 3 points to make, and I do want to emphasize with John Sarko the nature of this being consensus document, where we really considered a number of issues, including the growth generator issue. As someone who works with the Pitkin County Land Use Code and the City of Aspen Land Use Code, we have substantial things in place to limit growth and manage growth and have it ensure that development doesn't run rampant. I've never heard that the airport is really the place in which we need to do that. We do it on the land, the land use codes, and I think that's a very important consideration. The direct flight issue actually can offer us some environmental benefits. Because when a plane lands and takes off, we've been told by our experts, every time that occurs, a major amount of pollution relative to an airplane simply flying through the air occurs. So when you have to go to Denver, land, and then take off to go to New York City or wherever, that is actually increasing pollution over and above what a direct flight would offer. So if there are planes that can offer some expansion of direct flights, I don't think that they would be growth generators. That's handled in our land use code. And I do think that they would have considerable environmental benefits. Two other points. Valerie Braun provided a wonderful promotional piece from Mitsubishi on the M100. And I think we all saw it and were impressed, not only by the purported capabilities of the plane, but by the fact that Mitsubishi really targeted that promotional piece to many of our concerns here in Aspen and Pitkin County. But I would agree with Tom Fridstein and others who have said that limiting ourselves to one particular plane in the environment of potential planes is really not a good thing for our community. Ultimately, the airlines will decide what planes they choose to use. And what we heard from experts was that the CRJ 700 was diminishing in its ownership by regional carriers and was likely to be phased out. We also heard that sometimes these things happen quite precipitously, and the BAE jet that we used for many years here was actually eliminated quite quickly from the realm of regional airlines. And we had to scramble, I think, for a couple of years before the CRJ came along in order to find a replacement. So I think it's very important that we think seriously about accomplishing these runway improvements so that we can have the range of jets that would be appropriate for the airlines to use to come into Aspen. And finally, there's been a lot of discussion about the entrance to Aspen. And John Bennett, when he was mayor, and I, when I was community development director, we worked many years, John, before that, even on what ultimately became a record of decision for improvements to the entrance to Aspen. The good news about that was that it actually facilitated the bus rapid transit system that we have. And one of the things that is part of our recommendations is that the new terminal be located much closer and have much better connectivity to existing transit. And also another part of our recommendation is that we certainly encourage the governments to move forward on transit improvements. But we didn't think we could solve a problem that's been kicking around for, well, you name the number of years. Is it 50 years since we looked at an urban mass transit approach to solving our entrance to Aspen problems? So I think the committee wisely didn't try to take up specifics. Some people recommended a gondola system. Some people recommended rail. All sorts of ideas could be brought forward, but that would have really detracted from our major work. And our major work was really to establish consensus on these improvements. And I think we did a great job and really congratulate the leadership in steering us through that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stan.
Can I do some closing comments?
Yeah, go ahead and make a quirky comment.
I'm just going to go. My closing comments. First of
closing.
all, closing comments. I mean, because we are getting down, I want to make sure I get these thank yous in because I think it's very important. Huge thanks to John Bennett, my friend John Bennett.
Wait, Patty, wait. Patty, wait. Mona Newton has her hand up. Can we hear what Mona has to say before you close it?
I don't know. You have to ask the
Do we
chair.
have time?
Go ahead, Mona.
I listened to everything
I
Jackie tells
would,
me.
thank you very much. I'll be very quick here. And the comment that I really wanted to make is that you all noticed, and it's been brought up a couple of times, the fact that this committee, and through our consensus process, adopt a goal of a 30% reduction in carbon emissions. And it's been brought up that we don't know how we're going to get there.
And it's true. But as we've had this conversation today, there's a lot of aspects of this airport improvement project, depending on whatever you want to name it, that we don't know yet and how we're going to go forward. And so I just want to point that out, that was also part of the consensus building that we achieved and that we agreed upon with this process. And so I'm just really hoping that the county commissioners, you've got your climate action plan, you've set some goals, and that you will keep that in mind. And when we go forward and we have these conversations with the FAA and we think about the planes that we're going to make these transit improvements, that we really keep our eye on that ball to reduce carbon emissions by 30% in every way that we can. And I'd also like to encourage you to consider the improvements that can be made at this point at the airport. I've had the conversation with the folks that operate the GA. I know they're moving forward with some improvements on their own. Then we identified through the course of the 15 months some projects that could be done now at the airport that would help improve the efficiency of it. So with that, thank you very much for allowing the 15-month process, and John and Meg and Jackie, thank you, and thank you, commissioners, for taking the time to hear all of the presentations today.
Okay, thank you, Mona. George, response? Just a second.
So, Steve, what I would like to suggest is before we have closing comments, I want to make sure that any other Vision Committee members who would like to make some comments could. And if we have to go an extra half hour, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I am also. This is important. Thumbs up from all around. So that's a good idea, and I definitely want, the Vision Committee members served for over a year very faithfully, and we don't want to shortchange any of them who wish to make comments now doing so. So we have Andrew, Clint, Harrison, and John McBride.
I don't see any hands up.
And Jackie, you already had a chance to speak. I want to see if any of the others want to speak first.
Fair enough, Steve, fair enough.
Okay, so Clint has his hand up. Go ahead, Clint Kinney. You're not quite unmuted yet.
How's that?
Okay, there you go.
Sorry about that. I would just say I think the consensus process was difficult. I think it was well earned, and I would ask you to really pay attention to the report. There's a lot of great information in it, and I know a lot of work went into it, and I think it should speak for itself that even if it was 20 to 1 vote at the time, if it falls to 15 to 5 or 15 to 6, I think the vast majority, I think the consensus is strong because the compromises were hard-earned and in a good position for everybody. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint.
Thank you, Clint. Let's see. Richard Arnold, I'd love to hear from you. Are you there?
But they have to raise their hand. You can't just call out all of them.
I don't know how. I don't even know how you raise your hand on these things. I'm technologically challenged.
I can flip them on if you want to hear from them. Otherwise, we can wait for them to raise their hands.
Yeah.
Well, we could be here for a while.
So, how do they raise their hand so people can see?
His hand up.
Again?
So if you guys mouse over the screen, you'll get a bar that pops up across the bottom, and there should be an option in there to raise your hand. So we'll go to Clint's now.
I think you need to be closer to a mic.
So Clint just spoke, but maybe as a follow-up, he was very brief. Why don't you put Clint back on real quickly? Clint, go ahead.
I double punched my unmute. I'm done. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, you're the only one with your hand up. I'll give you, make it very brief, please.
Is that me?
Yes, Jackie Merrill.
Your hand was up again.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to put on the table a question that I have not explored fully enough myself, which is what are the possibilities and what are the advantages of going forward, having an airport advisory committee and or whatever else capacities the citizens have for a city-county collaboration. Yes, the airport's in the county, but yes, the city is very, very, very involved. And I'm not clear, unless I'm having a senior moment, whether we really explored that.
So I know that suggestion of making it an Pitkin County airport instead of a Pitkin County airport has been made to me and probably to other commissioners.
As it has been from Snowmass Village.
And I think we will be probably discussing that very question in our meetings going forward. No decisions or discussion have been held yet. Thank you for that question. Okay, let me just go. I'm going to call on Andrew. I'm looking at a list here. We're going to unmute you, Andrew, if you want to make any comments. Go ahead, Andrew. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead,
All right,
Andrew.
well, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I want to commend John again from the very beginning, John Bennett, getting us out of our foxholes and moving forward to come to an agreement with this very broad group with a lot of different opinions. The two things I do want to bring up was a question I think Kelly or somebody came up regarding the environmental assessment. I was a firm believer of shifting the runway, and that's an FAA, shifting it and widening it was a plan to make it safer. And I firmly believe that was the right track. But with much discussion, it was brought to my attention the new plan we have now relieves the community of a lot more construction impact. One less summer of closure, 2 shoulder seasons of closure, less money spent, less environmental destruction and dust and trucks and all this. So I want to reiterate how important the shift was, because I was one that didn't believe it. And that's a very clear direction in what our committee wants to do regarding the environmental side, cost savings, and the economic impact that it does not force the community to see for 2 full summers and 2 more extra shoulder seasons. The time frame will still be the same. It'll still take as long because we'll probably have 1 more year of the NEPA, as John said, and maybe an revised environmental assessment. So the timing doesn't change. It doesn't become shorter, but it becomes less of a construction period, which I want you guys to consider really strongly, because that's better for the community. Secondly, we have to move forward on this. Now with this COVID-19 and the construction of the new terminal will bring probably 300 jobs for 3 years, which will be a huge bonus to our construction community. Right after this, I don't know when it's going to end or who knows, but it would be a real bonus to our valley wide. So I beg and say, let's not continue to drag our feet. The FAA is ready to give us the money. So make your decisions wisely. But we have spent months, years working on this, and I believe we're in a very good position to give you guys all the information you need to move forward with a rapid decision. I don't mean to push you, but I do think time of the essence to get this done. We've been doing this for 10 years now. So that's all I've really got, but I just want to say thanks again. And John Bennett, one more time, I applaud you for your patience and your consideration and getting this group to make a consensus. And you too, John Peacock, for your leadership. So thank you all. And and Jackie, of course. Sorry, Jackie. Yes. And on and on and on. And you guys all did a wonderful job listening to us pontificate and answer our questions. So thank you again.
Thanks,
I
Andrew.
appreciate it. It was a great experience.
Okay, Michael, you have your hand up. Thank you very much, Andrew. We appreciate your comments. Michael, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. I believe the recommendation is extraordinarily well crafted, and I don't necessarily have anything more or new to add to it. I just want to reiterate that this was an exhaustive process. And the type of consensus that we were able to achieve, I have yet to see that in my professional career. It is extraordinary. The conversations were robust. At times they were unforgiving, but we came together as a group, as a community, and really came up with something that I think sort of sets the bar for how to do outreach and how to do consensus building. Yes, absolutely. Thank you to our leaders on that. And I just want to reiterate to the commissioners that as you consider the recommendations, I do believe that the common ground approach is in the best interest of our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael.
Hey, Steve, will you just ask them for their last names as well, so the record has that?
Okay. And Michael, I don't know how Michael's last name is pronounced. Michael Tunt? Let's see, Harrison.
Tunte, can you hear me?
Tunte.
Tunte?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Michael Tunte.
Tunte. Okay, thank you very much. Harrison Sachs next. Do you have anything you want to speak about? He's still muted. Just a second. Does he have to unmute his at home also?
He might be unmuting at the same time I'm unmuting.
Okay. Let's move on to, I don't want to call John Kinney, I'm going to get to you last. John McBride? You can call me at home anytime, John. We can almost throw a rock across the field at each other. And Dick Arnold, are you there? Why don't you unmute Dick Richard Arnold?
He still has to accept on his screen if he wants to speak.
Okay. I'm wondering if there's anybody sending chat stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Arnold.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, we hear you now. Go ahead, Dick.
This is Dick Arnold. Thank you. A lot of history at the airport, as you may know. Learned to fly there back in the early 70s. And I taught flying with Tailwinds Aviation for many thousands of hours. And then I was honored to be asked to be the airport manager. Did a lot of construction and a lot of talking with the FAA and everything. And my comments now are going to be very brief to the commissioners, and that's that no matter what we do or how we do it, you'll have a lot of input from others. But put the word safety in capital letters in front of everything you consider. It probably deals with my over 20 years with Mountain Rescue also, and having dealt with over 19 or 20 airplane accidents that happened around the Aspen area. And so I've seen a lot of it. So whatever we do, let's focus on safety. Thank you for being there. And thanks, John, for everything he's done.
All right, thank you. Thank you for those comments, Dick. And I did read your whole comments in our packet today too. You had lots of information in there I didn't understand all of it yet, but I hope to. Let's see. We haven't heard from Harrison or John McBride. Let me go to John Kinney. Let's see. John, are you?
Steve, I think I hit the wrong button. I had no question.
Okay, we can hear you. Go ahead.
He said he had no question.
John?
Steve, I must have hit the wrong. I must have hit the wrong button. I have no question.
Okay. Okay. No problem. Yeah, I know we'll get to talk to you plenty going forward. So the ones we haven't heard from are John McBride and, well, Mike Kaplan had to leave. So you will always will be able to talk to us in the future, but I think now we better go to Commissioner comments. So Patty,
Yes.
I'm gonna go to you first here in the room.
Thank you. I've been in this room since noon, so been long. But I appreciate being in this room. Again, I want to thank you. I want to thank my friend John Bennett, my friend Meg Haynes, and my good friend Jackie Francis for all the time. Jackie and I got in a competition on who was in my office more, me or her. I think Jackie won on that note. I also want to extend a huge thank to the Vision Committee members. I mean, you guys have just done an amazing job. And to all the advisory group members. To have this many people of our community submit, interest into this and stay involved is incredible, as is this community as a whole. And of course, a huge thanks has to go out to Pitkin County.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
No, but Bride wants to.
All right, John wants to.
Patty, finish up yours, and then we're gonna go to John, because you're already
Oh,
started.
thank you. It's been a day for that, it's been a tough one. I want a huge thanks to Pitkin County staff. They have gone above and beyond, hours and hours and hours, and, it's been tough, it's been a rough road, and we could not have done it without all of you and with John Peacock's leadership. And of course, that thank you is extended to City of Aspen staff, Snowmass Village, and Town of Basalt staff. Everybody, rallied to support everybody, and that was perfect. So my hope is that at the end of the day, our community will have come together, that our community will stand together on common ground. That's all I have to say, and thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
So
Clapper.
McBride, you can take over now.
John McBride, we're gonna unmute you on this end. And hopefully-
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say congratulations to all of you, and thank you for all the work you've done on this issue. You've covered almost everything, but one area I think needs more covering, and that is safety. I reiterate what Dick Arnold said.
Can you hear him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Lori, we can hear him.
I didn't do anything. Okay.
Damn.
You can't get away with anything, John.
I remember when we started, I just want to say one little thing. I remember we started this process. The most important thing to 98% of the people was safety. And I think we've got a lot more work to do with safety at the airport. As you know, it's a very small airport. It's tiny compared to other airports around. It's very high altitude in a narrow valley, mountain weather, as I say, a short runway, and then dangerously one way in and one way out. So I think I've asked forever to find performance specs from the various different aircraft that are flying in and might fly in the future, given certain winds, conditions.
Are they recording?
Hey, to me that's critical because unlike almost any other, it doesn't go straight out following center line, has to make a 180.
Hey, John, we're losing you a
Bigger
little
and
bit
heavier.
there. If you
The
could
other
just,
thing, I think this is
We'll just keep talking.
if you could just take two
losing
sentences back
me?
and repeat yourself, that'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
John, we're getting a weird echo out of your voice, like you are on the other side of the moon right now.
Aha! Figured that out. Well, if it isn't working, we can discuss it later.
That's better now.
I
We
have
can
some
hear you.
ideas I'd love to go over with you in the future. Okay, about, for instance, if I applaud you for not moving the runway and for putting some of GA on the other side of the runway on the west side. But there's a new danger inherent in that without a taxiway on the west side. Small aircraft crossing the runway, a runway that is one way in and another way out, is a very dangerous runway. And the worst thing that ever happened is some character doesn't do it right and he's just looking to the right and doesn't realize there's a plane landing from the left. I think that's pretty critical, and I encourage you to have, if you're going to have that separation, to have
the taxiway on the west side as well. But anyway, I think since it was our biggest concern at one time, we should spend a lot of time with it because we have a dangerous airport, and it would be nice if we could get out of that category. Granted, most of the accidents are done by people who did sort of stupid mistakes, but clearly we should have a brochure that goes to all FBOs all over the country so we eliminate that crisis we've had. 45 crashes in 50 years is a terrible embarrassment. But thank you for your good work, and hope we can continue to help.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate your comments. I'm look forward to more comments as we move forward in the months ahead. Okay, commissioner comments, closing comments at this point. And who wants to go first? Okay, Kelly? Kelly?
She's
You
working.
need to, there you go.
Hi, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to everyone here today and everyone who's listening and watching from home. You know, as the BOCC, we have a responsibility to protect and care for our assets so they last us a long time into the future. And this includes our built assets. It also includes our economic assets, which is why we have the airport master plan, the EA, and of course, this vision process we have today. But moreover, this responsibility also extends to protecting our community assets. And one of the things that jumped out to me in reading the reports was just the simple statement that said, what's good for the community is good for the airport. And that's the lens which I plan to regard these recommendations and the supporting documents through. This will naturally need to reflect our community's views on growth and the longstanding tradition of thoughtful conversations based on values surrounding growth in our community. So one of the recommendations related to a conversation around growth, the board for our 2020 strategic goals has set out as a goal to have a broader community conversation around growth, and particularly the increases in intensities of use that we think we're experiencing, rather than growth related to land use. So when I regard the recommendations, you know, I'm really going to be digging into those recommendations related to growth and how they connect to the vision and design for the airport. I think it's also important to look at the role of the airport, what it is and what it is not. As a county asset, it serves the county, but only insofar as it serves the community. You know, the asset is, or the airport is not, it's not something that funds the county or serves as a slush fund for other county and community programs. It's self-contained in that way. What it does do is, you know, serves as a important transportation hub. This is our connection to the outside world, and it's a cog in our community, or excuse me, a cog in our economy. And this, of course, benefits the county, but only insofar as our community remains the incredible, unique place that we all love and that people want to come visit. So it goes without saying, I think, that I know you expect me to support an airport plan that maintains our community and improves it. And that's what I commit to do. And I believe that that's what the committee has aspired to do as well.
Is that John again?
I'm thoroughly grateful. I think we put out a challenge.
John and Lori again.
The public to come to us with a thorough recommendation, and we've all gone above and beyond what we could have expected. So thanks to all the committee members, to our pilot, co-pilot, and navigator, John and Meg and Jackie, all of your incredible time, and to our exceptional staff that really stewarded this process through. Thank you.
Okay, George, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Make sure you mute the McBrides, will you?
They're kind of entertaining, actually.
John Bennett will appreciate this. We've always said that a path for consensus is to go slow to go fast. And I think that's what the Vision Committee has done, as well as all the other committees. You've gone slow to be able to go fast. And I just have to really commend you. This document is just a terrific document. 68 pages or so, tremendous information in it, looking at so many different concerns and issues. And I want to also acknowledge Valerie Braun. I read your minority report, and I was really impressed with it. I thought you posed a lot of questions and concerns for us to look at, and so I want to thank you for that. But even with that, even with Valerie's agreement that she supported 80% of the Vision Committee's report, is a tremendous success for the Vision Committee. I mean, you couldn't get 20 people to look outside and Aspen and have a consensus of what color the sky is. But you've been able to work through all these issues and all these concerns. And my goal is to move to ensure that the VLCC is able to reach a consensus as well, and that we're all in agreement, regardless of what direction we decide. But I'm hoping that we'll have an agreement and we'll have a consensus on our board to show the strength, the follow-up from the Vision Committee. And as John Peacock said very early on, this is just the beginning of the process. We're going to continue this process. We're going to ensure that there's public input. We're going to make sure it's transparent. But I'm not going to be swayed by any fake information, false information that's coming through, or any scare tactics from those who may oppose any of these issues. I think we want to keep this open and transparent and utilize all the information that we have at our hands. So again, I want to thank you all for your time and your work. And I know you're not done, and I'm sure you're going to be there as well when we need you. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. Greg?
I think the best thing I could do right now would be to echo what everyone else has said. I agree with what I heard from Patty, Kelly, and George so far. I'm sure we'll have a consensus on our appreciation for the committee and all the work you have all done all this time. It's awe-inspiring. And as George points out, that any group in Aspen could reach a consensus on anything is truly remarkable, especially something as complicated and fraught with peril as this process has been. So I want to thank everyone, and I'll give it back to Steve.
Thanks,
okay.
Greg.
Thanks, Greg. I would echo what everyone else has said. I go back a really long way with transportation in the Aspen area, and if I remember correctly, there was the Light Rail Transit Study Group back in the 1970s, and John, you were on that committee. That's the first time I ever met John Bennett. He's been working on transportation issues a really long time.
A long
also.
time.
And I would like to commend you and Jackie and Meg for being the co-chairs of this Vision Committee. You took on a Herculean task, really, and I think you've done an amazing job bringing it forward. I believe it was in my first commissioner meeting over 7 years ago that one of the topics of discussion was the airport. We've been talking about it for the last 7+ years in my case, and then Patty and George were talking about it before that. So the commissioners have been looking at this for a really long time. There are so many complex issues involved in the decision making around the airport. I don't think we're going to solve the entrance to Aspen problem. We might be able to make some headway on it through this process, but that was not the charge that your committee was given.
Yeah.
I think we got probably some more insight into how important it is and to try to solve that problem. We're not going to entirely solve the growth problem, because in the Roaring Fork Valley there are actually 4 counties in the Roaring Fork Valley, and we only control the growth regulations in part of the valley. So there's greater growth going on down valley in other counties than ours. We still have to take that into account. So I look forward to the process going forward. I look forward to the day when all of us can be together in one big room, like perhaps at the Aspen Institute, like was originally planned, where we can take public comment. So I do urge the public to, if you wish to do written comments right now, you can do that. And the website again is info@asevision.com. ASE are the letters for the Aspen Airport, ASE. And then we look forward to the day when we can get the oral comments from everybody in a public meeting. We don't know when that will be, but hopefully it won't be too long, that we can loosen up some of our public health orders a little bit, enough that we can do some public meetings with people still doing some social distancing and wearing face masks and whatnot, I think is probably where we're going for a while. So everybody, don't forget your face mask. I've used a neckerchief for decades on the ranch to keep dust out and whatnot, and this is just a new use for it. So Greg's got his also. So thank you everybody for participating today. We appreciate your time and your
ready
effort.
To go.
And we look forward to continuing the conversation as we move forward.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So,
Thank you. Thank you all.
We good? Thank you, Grassroots. Thanks, Jackie.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
And pat yourself on the back,
Thanks
everybody
for your
on the
patience.
Vision Committee. So, this work session is over. Everybody get home safely. It looks like winter has arrived again. We'll see you all next commissioners next Tuesday at, I'm not sure, 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, something.